Fairy Magic. Published by Igloo Books. One day, Annie spent ages at the bottom of her garden. "What are you doing?" asked Mummy. "I'm looking for fairies," replied Annie, "but there aren't any." "Come on," said Mummy, "let's go back inside and I'll get you a nice drink." Inside, Annie sat at the kitchen table and had a drink of orange juice. "Maybe fairies don't exist," she said, sadly, looking up at Mummy. "Of course they do," said Mummy, giving Annie a lovely cuddle, "but they are very shy. Maybe you could write them a letter." So, Annie wrote a special letter to the fairies. "Dear fairies, Mummy says you live at the bottom of our garden. I looked for you, but couldn't see you anywhere. If you are real, would you come and see me? Love, Annie." The next morning, to Annie's amazement, she found a letter on her pillow. The fairies, the bottom of the garden. "Dear Annie, thank you for your letter. Your mummy is right, we do live at the bottom of your garden and we are very shy. We hope to see you soon. Keep writing. Love, the fairies." Annie was puzzled by the letter. The writing looked a bit like Mummy's. "I wonder if Mummy wrote the letter and not the fairies," she thought. Annie wasn't sure that she even believed in fairies. She had gone to all the trouble of writing to them, but they hadn't come to see her. That night, when Annie went to sleep, she had a strange dream. She dreamt that she was a fairy and the little fairies in her garden had invited her to their picnic. There were cupcakes and flower drinks and fairy games. When Annie woke up, she decided to write another letter to the fairies. Maybe they are real after all, she thought. To the fairies, the bottom of the garden 26, Thistle Lane. Dear fairies, thank you for your letter. Last night, I had a dream about you. I would really love to see if you look the same as in my dream. Please, please, come and visit me. Love, Annie. The next morning, Annie came downstairs and found a postcard on the doormat, addressed to her. On top of it was a cupcake that looked delicious. Annie felt very excited as she settled down to read what the fairies had written. Annie, 26, Thistle Lane. Dear Annie, it was very nice to hear from you again. How lovely that you had a dream about us. Here is a little gift for you. It is one of our extra special, fairy cupcakes. Enjoy eating it. Love from, the fairies. When Annie had finished reading the postcard, she sat down and looked at the fairy cupcake. She smiled as she thought how much like one of Mummy's cupcakes it looked. I bet it was really Mummy who made this cake and wrote the letter, she said, taking a big bite. The cupcake was yummy, it tasted of toffee caramel and vanilla cream. Even though it really did taste like one of Mummy's cakes, Annie couldn't help noticing that the cupcake sparkled and tasted extra delicious. I'm still not sure if fairies do exist, thought Annie, but I had better send a thank you note, just in case Mummy thinks I am being rude. Annie got out her notepaper and wrote a thank you letter. Dear fairy friends, thank you for your fairy cake. It tasted delicious and it sparkled. I would like to know if you are real. Can you please write soon and let me know? Lots of love, Annie. Annie waited and waited for a letter to arrive, but nothing came. It is a bit rude of the fairies not to reply, she thought. I'm going to write to them again. So, Annie wrote yet another letter to the fairies. Dear fairies, I am disappointed that you haven't written back to me. I know that it is probably Mummy writing the letters, but I want to believe in fairies more than anything else in the world. I dream about you and I imagine that you have beautiful, floaty dresses and little wings. Is this true? Please let me know as soon as you can. Yours, very hopefully, Annie. Annie made sure that Mummy saw her taking the letter into the garden. Make sure you leave it in a fairy ring, called Mummy. Then the fairies will know it is extra special. Among the flowers was a little ring of red and white toadstools. Annie stepped carefully into the middle and gently laid her letter down on the grass. She closed her eyes and made a special wish. Fairies, fairies, come to me. If you are real, then let me see. Just as Annie opened her eyes, she was sure she saw little shapes flitting in amongst the flowers. I must be imagining things, she thought, but I hope the fairies send me a reply to my letter soon. Annie didn't have to wait very long for a reply from the fairies. That afternoon, she was sitting on her swing when a letter appeared beside her as if by magic. She carefully opened it and began to read. The fairies. The bottom of the garden. Dear Annie. Sorry we haven't replied to your letter before now. We have been very busy preparing something for a special friend of ours. Draw a picture of yourself as a fairy and your wish might come true. Much love, your friends. The fairies. I love drawing pictures, said Annie. She ran inside, found a piece of paper and began to draw a picture of herself as a fairy. She used paints and crayons, then carefully cut out the little picture. Annie took it to the fairy ring and left it there. The next day, Annie found a wonderful surprise on her pillow. It was an invitation to a party from the fairies. We, the fairies, would like to invite you, our special friend, to a picnic at 12:30 p.m. at the bottom of the garden. With love. The fairies. At first, Annie felt very excited. Then, she felt worried. What if it was Mummy who was secretly writing the letters? What if Annie got all dressed up and the fairies didn't come? If they didn't exist, she would be very disappointed. Annie ran upstairs and flung open her wardrobe. She pulled out her floaty fairy dress and her special pair of fairy wings. She even found a fairy wand in her toy box. Annie brushed her hair and put her prettiest hair slide in. She put on her bracelets, her flower necklace and her pretty pink party pumps. I'm ready, thought Annie, and she went downstairs and out into the garden. Annie crept past the kitchen window, where Mummy was busy washing up. She was sure she could hear tinkling laughter coming from the bottom of the garden. Sure enough, to Annie's amazement, the fairies were waiting for her. Welcome to our picnic, said the fairies, giggling and flitting around. Annie felt like she was in a wonderful, fairy dream. She had such fun eating the yummy fairy cakes and playing fairy games. I'm so happy that you are real, she cried. After that, Annie went to visit the fairies every day. Mummy was very pleased that she had found them. At last, all of Annie's fairy dreams had come true.
Hi! If you like this video, please give this a like and hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon to get notified whenever I release a new video.